everyone. I'm Elizabeth Corey, and I am the founder of BeatingTrauma.com. And today we are going to be talking about denial. But I want to talk about it a little differently than normal. Just kind of see both sides of denial, because we often talk about denial like it's all bad, especially when we're in recovery, right? Because denial is one of the things that gets in the way the most. But today I want to talk also a little bit about how it has helped us and maybe even still is to a degree. Normally, the controller is the one who kind of runs the denial program in our system, to be honest. But and while we are always kind of, it feels like, fighting against that controller and the things they do to stop us from seeing the whole truth, there can be ways in which denial isn't all bad. So I want to try to break it down a little bit and talk about it maybe in some ways a little differently, in some ways not, to kind of get an idea of how it both helps us and blocks recovery. Because the truth is, it does both. And truly, almost every single one of our defense mechanisms or survival skills, depending on how you want to put it, has both a grounded and ungrounded representation to it. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind and know what we might be dealing with at any point. Even the controller can be grounded, believe it or not, that is a thing, just like with all of our parts. Just like with all of our emotions, it's not that we're supposed to eliminate all these things from existing in our lives. That's not how it works. Our job is to ground so that we're utilizing all of these skills in the best way for us. So the more we understand the nuances of survival skills like denial, the better we can be at moving past it when it isn't working for us. So I'm going to start off here by talking a little bit about how denial helped us in childhood. Because for a lot of us, denial is something that's really frustrating now. But like most survival skills, there was a time when it was an absolute necessity. I want to talk a little bit about how that denial helped us when we were just little kids, because the truth is, at least the truth for most of us, is that as young children, we were trapped. We were trapped in an environment that was not supporting us. We were stuck, okay? And there was no way that we could fully embrace the whole truth of what was happening to us and honestly survive it. So we told ourselves, there's a few things we told ourselves, but one thing we told ourselves was that it wasn't that bad, okay? And by the way, the same part that uses denial also uses dissociation. So if something really was really bad, we would dissociate that away so that we could continue to tell ourselves that it's not that, right? So this was a strategy we used. And the other strategy, again, also in alignment with this ideal of denial in general, was that we told ourselves it was our fault. Okay, now that might not sound like it's a very good thing, but we told ourselves that because that way we could convince ourselves that there was still something we could do about it. I like to refer to this as fake control. So you might not be totally surprised to understand that the controller is very interested in control. And for most of us in our adult lives, we do try to control a lot of things. Some controllable, some not so much. But in childhood, we were definitely attempting to find ways to control things. And usually we didn't actually have very much control. But we would attempt to find it because that was an element of the denial. The denial says, I can make it better. I can figure out how to live in this environment and make it work for me. It's not that bad. These are all strategies of the denial that the controller is using. So if we tell ourselves that it's our fault, which sounds like a horrible thing to do, but if we do that, we can then say, you know what, a way that I can fix it. If the onus falls on me, then there's a way I can fix it. Okay. The truth is that if we had really come to understand what happened to us, what our real truth was, and the fact that we didn't have the more basic needs that children have, like to be protected and to be supported, if we realized we didn't have those things, would have meant utter despair for us. I mean, truly, we would have fallen into some really, really intense emotions. And as children, we don't necessarily have what it takes to process that stuff out. That's now in adulthood, the controller thinks we still don't have what it takes to process that stuff out, but we do. But then we couldn't do it. Our brain was still developing. We didn't have an adult self. There was no way that we could have worked with that kind of feeling and not done something pretty drastic. So we told ourselves basically lies about our experiences to get ourselves through it. And that was a survival skill. And I'll be honest, I could sit here and rate all the survival skills from all the parts. And this one, combined with dissociation, was absolutely the number one effective strategy for getting through a childhood where you actually have no control and no escape. Okay, like this is how you do it. The textbook 101, you got to bring in the denial and the dissociation. You're not getting through it any other way. And sometimes we judge ourselves when we get to adulthood and say, how could I have done this? I hope you will take a step back, especially after listening to what I'm saying today, and go, yeah, that was pretty brilliant. It is pretty brilliant that we can do this at all. It's quite a skill. It's quite a skill. And yes, there are a lot of humans doing it, but the fact that our systems will allow it and that we can find a way to make it through using denial and dissociation is pretty impressive. That's just the truth. So even though most of the time we're very frustrated with the controller and we just sort of want to curse them out, which is probably the freedom fighters, let's be honest, we could maybe take a minute and go, yeah, that's pretty impressive what you did back then, right? So now I'm going to take a second and I'm going to talk about how denial has helped us in adulthood. And it's interesting because for the most part, I say denial is not a super good skill to use in adulthood. I'm not going to sit here and go, yeah, use denial to get yourself through. But the other day I was just kind of thinking about something. I was talking to a client about it. And I came up with a particular scenario where denial has actually benefited me. And I wanted to talk about it because, maybe just to kind of give the controller a little pat on the back there, even though they may not have done it for the reason that, they may have done it because they really were trying to use invalidation to keep us in denial and in dissociation. In this case, it actually worked out for the better. So this is, as I said, this is a really new understanding that I'm coming to. But I started to realize that denial has actually helped me in recovery. Now, it has also hurt me, but it has helped me in recovery because, truthfully, when we are healing, the controller will often say things like, there aren't any memories to recover. It wasn't that bad for me. Like this person has had it way worse than me. I get that comment from people who contact me almost every day, to be honest. It can be, I can be done with this really quickly because I didn't really have that much trauma. And while on one level, these things can be very invalidating because there are parts in your system that are probably saying, oh goodness, like, shut up, because that's not the truth. At the same time, much like they did in childhood, they can actually keep us moving through recovery, especially in the early days of recognizing that we may have memories or that we may have dissociated in ways we didn't think we did. In the early days, before we really come to understand that, the controllers, these kind of controller statements of denial, can actually keep us working on our healing. And what I mean by that, and this is what I was talking about the other day, is like, if I knew all the memories that were there before I got started, if I knew how much there was there for me to process, for me to understand, the person I was when I started might not have started, right? Now, the person I am today would have been like, oh yeah, definitely, we need to do it. But that person would probably not have started, right? But because my controller was saying it wasn't that bad, we should be finished by, I don't know, next week, I was able to kind of stay in the game. And yes, in some cases it was hour or day by day, week by week, right? Like, I don't think we can really look at this kind of processing on a big picture level. It's too overwhelming. And honestly, most of us don't have enough information to do that anyway. That's the thing about dissociation. Don't even necessarily know what's coming. But I can say that in my early days, my controller's stories about what we needed to do actually was very helpful to keep me moving on this journey. So I don't think there's a ton of examples of how denial helps us in adulthood, but I can say that when we're facing something tough, and when I say this, I mean something good that's tough, right? Like something that's really going to help us. Sometimes maybe thinking it'll be a little easier than it is might actually be useful, and that can also be true with your purpose. Like if you start moving in the direction of something and you're like, yeah, this won't be that bad. This won't be that hard. I could do this, even if it's just, I could take it like day by day, because you actually can. Maybe that's not a good example of denial, but maybe it's more like, this will be easy, right? Like, this will be easy. This will be no problem. I can finish this up this week. Maybe sometimes that's a good thing for us, right? It puts us on that road and it keeps us on that road. And one of the big things about the controller, from my perspective, is that it's trying to keep us moving. Now, in childhood, it was just trying to keep us moving to the end of childhood. In adulthood, it tries to keep us moving on anything other than looking at this we're looking at here. But if it's something that's really, really good for us to be doing, and I'm not talking about the directions that controllers sometimes take us, which is not good for us, then hey, maybe a little bit of denial about how challenging something's going to be might keep us on the path, right? Jan is saying, brilliant for a child. Yes, this is making me cry and release much sadness for my little child. Just the fact that these defenses were needed to be created. Yes, like that's so important to understand, is like the fact that we needed to do this at all tells us a lot about how significant our trauma was in the childhood, that we experienced was definitely full of losses. So Carol is saying the controller lifts the veil bit by bit. Yeah, it does. And maybe sometimes that's how we need it to be done, right? So the truth is, yes, it would not work for us to start doing this work and suddenly be flooded with every single memory we have. I actually have worked with a client whose defense mechanism was memory flooding, which means just getting tons and tons and tons of memories, so there's no way she could process them all. So I have seen that happen. It's fairly rare because obviously controllers would not like that normally, but it does sometimes happen. And in that case, it's very, very difficult for us to process that. And that's why the denial and dissociation and by the way, it's not the controller actually that releases memory by memory, but the controller's denial does kind of keep us doing bit by bit, as we can. When we let go completely, that's when the higher self or the grounded adult self really take control. And they know what to tell us and when. It's just the controller doesn't trust them. So that's part of the issue. So next I want to talk a little bit about the more obvious stuff. Maybe it's more obvious. I don't know. But I really don't want to spend too much time talking about how great denial is without talking about how it harms us, because I think it's a really important understanding for us to have. So I'm going to talk about just a few ways in which denial is not our friend in adulthood, okay? The first one is that it can put us in harm's way, okay? Because we are not able to see the real dangers of people and situations if those things are too similar to childhood, okay? Because when we tell ourselves a denial story in childhood, we are literally convincing ourselves that something is not that bad. Well, that means, and sorry about my cat, that means that when we do get to our adult lives, we might run into some of the same behaviors and situations and also tell ourselves it's not that bad. And that's a problem, because we can actually continue to put ourselves in potentially dangerous situations because sorry, there may have been a little blip there for a second. That's not in our favor to deny current situation. The next one is that it can keep us in, I'm calling it the chains of the karma kid, because it does sort of feel like that. Because on an unconscious level, we still believe that we could have changed things because it's our fault. So this is a karma kid belief system that it's our fault, right? So she clearly wants to be in the video today. So we need to kind of really look at that as well and make sure. Now, I will also say that most people that I talk to will say, I know it wasn't my fault. I'm not talking about conscious here. I'm talking about the unconscious. And many times we will have the long-living unconscious belief that there were things that we could have done to make it better. So just understanding that is helpful. The next one is that it can keep us really tied in with that love seeker because we are invalidating our own grief and we're looking for others to rescue us. So keep in mind that the love seeker believes their only way to heal is to find somebody else to make it right. And this is, unfortunately, that it's not free to live that way. Actually, like, our freedom is not, it's sort of missing when we live in this particular way. We're on this constant hunt for other people to make it better. So denial keeps us in that place. When we can finally understand that the love seeker is in pain and needs to heal, and we can help them heal, then we can stop kind of feeling so much of that need to get other people to help us out. And another really important message here is that over time, it can really hurt the body. This is why you let your cats out of the room before you start your live stream. Just telling you. But over time, it can hurt the body because the truth lives in the body. And honestly, when we keep all that trauma stored in the body and we don't let it out and we keep telling ourselves stories in the head and we live in the head and we do everything in the head, the body can start to have problems because we're not addressing the trauma that's there. And this is, unfortunately, can become significant, including like a lot of chronic ailments, physical pain, basically all those things that when you go to a medical establishment, they tell you they don't know what caused it and they don't know how to heal it, right? Those are the trauma things right there. That's it. So denial doesn't help us in many, many, many ways in our adult life. And so I need to kind of end on that point because I've been talking to you today about how denial helps, and there are so many ways that it doesn't. So I really wanted to kind of bring that to you today when you start thinking, oh, Elizabeth is pro-denial. I am not. But I do think, like everything, there is a grounded and an ungrounded side to things. There are nuances to everything. Even things like futility have a grounded side to them where it's like, you know what? Sometimes it actually doesn't matter. Sometimes it literally doesn't matter. There are things, like if you're 5 minutes late for a child's play date, it actually doesn't, right? Sometimes the controller can get a little obsessive about things and will kind of die on every hill that's available to them. And so it is good for us to look at both the grounded and ungrounded, all of the nuances associated with all of our survival skills and the emotions that are sitting in our system. Because they are often, I will say there is often a much bigger gray area to the ways in which they have both harmed and helped us along the way. And really, I think being able to understand the nuances of these different survival skills does bring us to a much more self-compassionate approach to our healing. So Jan is saying, this information is so rich. Light bulbs turning on for me. Never looked at denial this way. Wow. My body has carried this for decades. Autoimmune conditions. Yeah. And I'll be clear. A lot of people are carrying this and have been carrying this for decades. And yes, it does cause issues like autoimmune. If we can get to a place where we can know our full truth. And I'll be honest, I'm still on that journey. I'm not fully aware of everything that happened to me. I don't have my full truth. I got a lot of it. I got a whole lot of it. But if we can get to that place, living in our bodies would be, it would just be simpler and easier and a lot more peaceful and more comfortable, generally speaking. Carol's saying, hard to deny you have a chat in the room, isn't it? I don't even know where she went now. She's probably hiding somewhere to come and, make an appearance at the very end of the video just for fun. But yes, there's a cat. I can't deny it. And I can't deny that I feel like this was a very helpful topic for us today. We need to talk about denial more. We need to give a little tiny bit of kudos to the controller because, they got us through some really, really hard stuff. And then we also need to have that tough conversation with the controller that says, okay, thank you. However, there are places where denial is not serving us and we need to work on it. Right? So absolutely. So thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you for all your comments. And Trish put a cute kitty in there. And thank you for your tolerance. This my cat decided to make her. I was going to say debut today, but I think she's been in live streams before. But I look forward to talking to you guys again next Tuesday, and I plan to see you then. Thank you guys. Bye.